Picture standing on a hillside in Europe, right? The air is, well, it's crisp. There's a slight mist rolling through the valley, and you are looking out over an absolutely stunning sunset.
Oh, yeah, just painting the sky in those deep, fiery oranges and soft purples.
Exactly. And below you, there's this wide, slow-moving river reflecting all that light, just winding its way through thick, dark green pine trees.
Sounds incredibly peaceful. Almost idyllic, like a scene from a totally forgotten corner of the world.
It really feels like the kind of place where time just stands still. You see a little road curving along the bank, some quaint houses with terracotta roofs.
Right, classic European countryside.
Yeah, but right at the edge of the road, bathed in that golden hour light, is a solitary yellow road sign. And it just says, in simple black letters, Gornja Siga.
And that is where the illusion of that peaceful, quiet valley kind of breaks down completely.
It really does, because you're not just looking at a pretty river valley, you're actually looking at the site of one of the internet's most complex and honestly viral geopolitical experiments.
Yeah, it's wild. The contrast between the physical landscape and the digital noise surrounding it is just massive.
Right. So today we are taking you on a journey into this tiny, unresolved patch of land on the Danube River. It's sitting right on the border between Croatia and Serbia.
And to do that, we're diving into a really fascinating academic paper. It's titled The Mythology of Liberland and the Silence of Diplomatic History.
Yes, and the mission of our deep dive today is to unpack how a highly technical, basically bureaucratic glitch over where a river flows accidentally gave birth to a self-proclaimed cryptocurrency-fueled micronation.
Called Liberland.
Exactly, Liberland. And looking at your setup over there today, I mean, the backdrop is just a wild collage. You've got vintage cadastral maps overlapping with these highly complex post-Yugoslav star charts.
Yeah, it looks a bit like the war room of a historically minded astronomer, I know. But what we're dealing with today is fundamentally about lines on a map.
And how people project their own, massive, almost cosmic ideologies onto those lines.
Precisely. We are navigating between the hard ink of diplomatic history and the vast, kind of lawless space of internet mythology.
Okay, let's unpack this. The basic premise of this whole phenomenon is that the founder of this micronation, Liberland, looked at this little patch of land, Gornja Siga, and just claimed it was terra nullius.
Which means unclaimed territory. Basically asserting that nobody owns it.
Right, nobody owns it. And because nobody owns it, he and his supporters decided, well, they were going to build a libertarian utopia right there in the mud.
Yeah, the pitch is zero heavy state intervention, entirely voluntary governance, and everything running on cryptocurrency.
Sounds like an internet fever dream. But the geopolitical reality is far messier than that pitch, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
This story is fundamentally about how digital age mythology, the stories that get told online about freedom and governance, how that collides with the uncompromising realities of 1990s diplomatic history.
You might be driving right now or doing the dishes thinking, I have absolutely no intention of starting my own country in the Balkans, so why does this matter to me?
It's a fair question.
It is. But it matters because this story reveals, step by step, exactly how modern digital storytelling can just completely overwrite complex historical truths.
Yeah, it shows us how a literal mapping error, a bureaucratic typo almost, can be transformed into a viral symbol of anti-government rebellion.
It's a masterclass in how narratives are built today. And even if you don't care about borders, you probably care about how media manipulates reality.
It's a massive case study in how unresolved borders anywhere in the world really can suddenly become these huge symbolic battlegrounds. It's about ideology, it's about digital libertarianism, and people just desperately searching for alternative visions of sovereignty.
So before we can really understand the mythology of Liberland, we have to get our boots muddy. We need to understand the actual dirt it sits on.
Right, the geography of the accident.
Yeah. How does a piece of prime European real estate sitting right on a major river seemingly become unclaimed in the middle of the modern era?
Well, to get that, we have to rewind to the early 1990s, specifically the collapse of Yugoslavia.
A very dark, very chaotic time.
Exactly. It was a period of intense, often violent disintegration.
Mm-hmm.
Newly independent republics were emerging, and what used to be internal administrative boundaries.
Like state lines here.
Right, lines drawn merely for regional management within a single sovereign state. Suddenly, those became highly contested international frontiers.
So if the United States dissolved tomorrow, the border between, say, Ohio and Michigan wouldn't just be a friendly football rivalry anymore.
No, it would be a heavily guarded international border.
And they would have to figure out exactly where the line in the dirt actually was. which is never as simple as it looks on a highway sign.
Borders are rarely as neat as we want them to be, and they almost never align perfectly with natural geography. So the main point of contention between Croatia and Serbia was the Danube River.
Which is huge. It's a major geographical feature.
Massive. And the geopolitical principle applied during the breakup of Yugoslavia was this concept called uti possidetis juris.
Okay, let's break that down. It's a Latin phrase, right?
Yes. It roughly translates to as you possess under law. In international law, it dictates that newly formed sovereign states should retain the internal borders that their preceding dependent area had before independence.
So whatever lines were on the books when you were part of Yugoslavia, those are your new international borders when you leave Yugoslavia. Sounds simple enough in theory.
In theory, yes. The problem with applying that to the Danube is that, well, rivers move.
Yeah, they're not exactly known for respecting bureaucratic paperwork.
Exactly. Rivers are highly dynamic systems. They flood, they erode banks, they naturally change their course over decades and centuries. But the real bureaucratic nightmare here stems from 19th century Austro-Hungarian engineering.
Wait, really? We're blaming the Austro-Hungarian Empire for an internet crypto country.
We actually are. To improve navigation for steamboats and prevent catastrophic flooding, engineers back then engaged in these massive hydraulic projects.
Okay, so they were trying to tame the river.
Right. They dredged channels, they cut off meanders, and essentially they straightened the Danube out.
So they physically moved the river. But let me guess, the legal paperwork didn't keep up with the shovels.
You nailed it. Historically, the area was mapped out using what are called cadastral maps.
Cadastral, that's a property boundary registry, is right, used for taxation and land ownership.
Exactly. And these historical cadastral maps, drawn before and during these massive engineering projects, they track the old meandering path of the river.
The natural path before they straightened it.
Right. They no longer correspond to the modern engineered navigable channel of the Danube River that is physically flowing today.
So the map says the river is right here, but if you go stand in the mud, the water is actually like a mile over there.
Precisely. And this discrepancy allowed both of these newly formed nations, Croatia and Serbia, to adopt whichever interpretation most benefited them territorially.
Oh, of course. Why wouldn't you pick the map that gives you more land? So how do they split the argument?
Well, Croatia generally argues that those historical cadastral boundaries, the old ink tracking the old meanders that defines the international border.
Okay, and Serbia.
Serbia argues that the modern current physical flow of the Danube River, specifically the Thalweg, which is the middle of the primary navigable channel that should determine sovereignty.
So if they are using two completely different sets of rules to draw the line, those lines are going to cross each other in really weird ways.
It creates a massive headache on the ground. This dual interpretation created several disputed overlapping pockets of land.
Like Venn diagram overlaps, but with heavily forested floodplains.
Exactly. So there are territories that Croatia claims under the cadastral system, which technically sit on the Serbian side of the modern river.
Okay, so Croatia says that's ours, even though it's across the water.
Right. And there are territories Serbia claims under the Thalweg system, which sit on the Croatian side. It is just a tangled mess of competing claims and river islands.
But Gornja Siga, our little Sunset Valley with the yellow sign, that one is special, isn't it? It's not just an overlapping claim.
No, it's not. It's an inversion. Gornja Siga is the ultimate anomaly in this whole mess.
How so?
Because of the way these two specific conflicting logics interact at that exact geographic coordinate, Croatia looks at Gornja Siga and says, well, according to Serbia's logic, where the modern river is the border, that land sits on the eastern bank and belongs to Serbia.
So Croatia is actually pointing at the land and saying, hey, according to your rules, Serbia, that belongs to you.
Exactly. But Serbia looks at the exact same piece of land and says, no. According to Croatia's logic, the old cadastral maps place that land on the western side of the historical line, so it falls under Croatian jurisdiction.
Oh my gosh, so if I'm understanding this, it's like two neighbors arguing over a property line where a creek runs.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, so neighbor A says the property line is where the creek used to be 50 years ago. Neighbor B says the line is exactly where the creek is flowing today.
Right.
And because they are so fiercely defending their own rules, they've accidentally left a little patch of grass between the two lines that neither of them claims is theirs.
Just to avoid validating the other person's argument.
Yeah. They are basically ignoring the grass because claiming it would ruin their broader legal case for much larger, more valuable pieces of land up and down the street.
What's fascinating here is that neither side wants to step onto that patch of grass and formally claim it. Doing so would implicitly accept the opposing geographical logic,
which would cost them thousands of hectares of disputed territory elsewhere along the river.
Exactly. By trying to maintain structural integrity in their macro negotiations, they created a micro vacuum.
They created the perception of an orphan piece of land.
And that word is critical. Perception. Because legal contradiction and administrative ambiguity do not magically generate ownerless territory.
So just because they're arguing doesn't mean the land is up for grabs.
Right. The fact that Croatia and Serbia are locked in a legal paradox regarding Gornja Siga does not mean the land has somehow exited the international system. It's simply disputed territory where the specific nature of the dispute happens to be mutually exclusive.
Okay, but if I'm the founder of Liberland, I'm looking at that perception of unclaimed land and seeing a massive foundational legal claim.
Of course. It looks like a loophole.
Right. If neither country is actively claiming it, why can't a guy with a flag and a crypto wallet just paddle up the river, plant his flag in the dirt, and say, mine? Which brings us directly to the doctrine of terra nullius.
Yeah, terra nullius is the absolute cornerstone of the mythology of Liberland.
It translates to land belonging to no sovereign state, right?
That's right. And if a piece of land is truly terra nullius, international law historically allowed for a state to acquire sovereignty over it through occupation and effective control.
But that concept has a ton of historical baggage, doesn't it? It sounds like something straight out of the Age of Discovery.
Oh, it absolutely does. The doctrine of terra nullius has a highly infamous history. It was essentially the primary legal fiction used by colonial powers to justify expanding into lands that were already inhabited by indigenous populations.
So they would just roll up, see people living there, but because they didn't have, like, a European king, they just called it empty.
Precisely. By legally defining the land as empty of recognized sovereign states, colonial powers completely ignored the complex societies already living there and claimed it for themselves.
That is incredibly dark. So modern courts probably aren't exactly eager to dust off a legal concept used to justify mass colonial expansion.
Not at all. Modern legal systems view the concept of terra nullius with profound skepticism. International law has evolved significantly since the colonial era.
I would hope so.
Yeah, so the bar for a piece of territory to qualify as genuinely legally ownerless today is incredibly high. For that to happen, the surrounding states must clearly, formally, and explicitly renounce their sovereignty over it.
Like sign on the dotted line renouncing it.
Exactly. It's a concept known in international law as dereliction.
They have to put it in writing. They have to sign a document that officially abandons the territory to the void.
Right. Ambiguous administrative control, like we see at Gornja Siga or unresolved paralyzed borders, they do not automatically create legally vacant land.
So a disagreement between Croatia and Serbia is just a disagreement. It does not constitute formal abandonment.
Exactly. The legal presumption is always that territory belongs to someone, even if that someone is currently contested or unclear.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. Let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
If international law prizes efficiency and neither state is actively administering this land, I mean, let's say there are no police patrolling it, nobody's collecting taxes from anyone living there, there's no infrastructure being built,
right?
Why shouldn't a finder's keeper's rule apply? If land is sitting completely unutilized while governments bicker over it for decades, allowing a private entity to step in and actually develop it, it seems logically sound, doesn't it?
I see the appeal of that logic. But if we connect this to the global geopolitical landscape, allowing a finder's keeper's rule on disputed borders would trigger systemic collapse.
Really? Systemic collapse? That sounds dramatic.
It's actually not an overstatement. There are hundreds of active border disputes around the world today. Think about the Spratly Islands in the South China Sea.
Oh, yeah, massive tensions there.
Or the Kashmir region between India and Pakistan.
Right.
Or the Bir Tawil Triangle between Egypt and Sudan.
Right, another famous unclaimed spot.
Exactly. If international law established a precedent where an unresolved border dispute generated automatic sovereignty rights for third parties, the modern international order would literally shatter.
Oh, wow, because every single contested frontier would become a magnet for private occupation.
Yes. Massive corporations, radical ideological movements, or well-funded private militias would just rush to occupy these friction zones,
creating thousands of micro-conflicts all over the globe.
Exactly. International law strongly, structurally resists this idea, specifically to prevent endless geopolitical fragmentation.
So the system interprets disputed territory simply as disputed territory.
Right. It's an issue to be resolved exclusively by the states involved through bilateral negotiation, arbitration, or international courts.
It is not a reservoir of free real estate for independent private state formation projects.
No, it's not. The states retain their latent sovereign rights even during dispute.
So legally speaking, the door is shut. Terra nullius doesn't apply because Croatia and Serbia haven't formally abandoned it. They're just stuck in a paradox.
Correct.
So what about the historical intent of the people who originally drew these lines?
The diplomatic history angle.
Yeah. I mean, did the architects of the Balkan peace process somehow intend to leave a loophole? Did they want this to be an experiment?
The source text analyzes this thoroughly, and it's quite definitive. There is zero evidence that the architects of the Balkan peace process envisioned anything resembling a future micronation. Zero. They certainly didn't deliberately leave a legal vacuum.
Let's talk about who was actually drawing these lines. The major diplomatic figures of that post-war settlement in the mid-1990s included some serious regional heavyweights.
Absolutely. You had leaders like Franja Tuman of Croatia, Slobodan Milojevic of Serbia, and Alija Izetbegovic of Bosnia and Herzegovina.
And the international mediators included Richard Holbrooke from the United States.
Right. These were the people sitting in rooms at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base during the Dayton Accords, staring at maps, trying to forge a peace out of a absolutely devastating conflict.
So the research paper combed through the records from those negotiations?
It did. And there is no memoir, no negotiation transcript, no declassified archival document, and no testimony from anyone involved suggesting that Gornja Siga was intentionally excluded from sovereign claims to create a neutral zone.
So no secret meetings about a libertarian utopia?
None. No diplomatic record implies any awareness whatsoever of its future symbolic importance.
Okay, but I spent enough time observing internet culture to know exactly how conspiracy theories form.
Oh, I'm sure you do. Let's hear it.
People point to the silence. They say, look, there's no document proving they didn't want it to be a micronation. They never explicitly said it couldn't be a crypto-utopia, so they must have secretly left the door open. Isn't silence exactly what a conspiracy needs to thrive?
This raises an important question about how we read history. Political myths absolutely thrive by taking historical silence and reinterpreting it as hidden intent or some grand conspiracy.
Which is so easy to do when the people involved aren't around to correct the record.
Exactly. But the far more plausible and documented explanation is simply bureaucratic complexity and the harsh realities of the time.
I mean, put us in the room with those negotiators in 1995. What were they actually dealing with?
These leaders were not sitting around philosophizing about the future of digital governance or experimental libertarian zones.
Obviously not.
No. They were managing active, brutal wars. They were dealing with ethnic cleansing, massive refugee crises, trying to hold together fragile ceasefires.
They were trying to build new constitutional structures for a completely fractured Bosnia.
Yes, and negotiating the lifting of crippling international sanctions. The stakes could not have been higher.
The scale of the crisis was monumental. They were literally trying to stop a genocide and stabilize an entire continent.
Exactly. In that context, a 7-square-kilometer, totally uninhabited, mosquito-infested floodplain on the banks of the Danube River was a completely negligible issue.
A highly technical, completely irrelevant issue.
Right. It was a clerical error left unresolved amid broader political chaos, mostly because the political capital required to solve it was needed for much larger territorial swaps.
Things like the Posavina corridor or the status of Sarajevo.
Yes, exactly. Real populated territories with massive strategic importance.
So the idea that Tuman, Milosevic, or Holbrooke deliberately preserved a legal vacuum for a future internet micronation supported by cryptocurrency enthusiasts,
Absurd.
It really takes the ideological interests of contemporary digital culture and just projects them backward onto a historical period dominated by visceral territorial war.
It's a massive anachronism.
Mm-hmm.
Historical silence does not automatically prove conspiracy. Most of the time, silence simply reflects irrelevance at the time the events actually occurred.
They just didn't care about the mud patch.
Exactly. The map makers at Dayton were using state-of-the-art Department of Defense terrain mapping technology to draw ceasefire lines through mountains and villages just to keep armies apart. They were not concerned with a microscopic cadastral anomaly on a riverbank.
Okay, so legally, Liberland has no foundation under the doctrine of terra nullius.
None.
And historically, it's a fabrication built on the silence of busy diplomats managing a war.
Correct.
Yet millions of people know what Liberland is. It is undeniably famous.
Oh, it's a huge phenomenon.
So we have to transition from the hard historical facts to the media narratives. How did a technical mapping error from the 90s become a global viral sensation?
Well, Liberland occupies a very strange, very potent intersection of modern culture. It exists in this blurred space between political satire, performance art, genuine ideological experimentation, and modern online activism.
And the internet completely transformed the concept of micronations, didn't it?
Entirely. Before the internet, if you wanted to start micronation, you had to build a physical platform.
Right, like the Principality of Sealand on that abandoned anti-aircraft platform in the North Sea.
Exactly. Or Rose Island off the coast of Italy. It required physical engineering, significant capital, and usually resulted in an immediate physical confrontation with a local navy.
Which didn't usually end well for the micronation.
No, it didn't. But the internet transformed micronations from localized eccentricities into globally networked phenomena. Digital platforms allow founders to present themselves as heads of state to a global audience instantly.
Yeah, they can just spin up a website, they can issue virtual citizenships, draft open source constitutions, design flags,
and cultivate massive communities and economies without ever needing to hold an inch of physical ground.
It's basically role-playing on a geopolitical scale, but with real-world ideological momentum. And, importantly, real money.
Yes, the money aspect is huge. Vítě Vlka, a Czech politician and activist, founded Liberland in April 2015.
He actually went there, right?
He did. He and a few companions physically traveled to Gornja Siga, planted a flag, and declared the Free Republic of Liberland. But the physical act was really secondary to the digital launch.
The flag planting was a photo op for the website.
Exactly. Liberland went viral because it managed to hit the perfect cocktail of modern internet narratives.
The paper identifies several key ingredients that make a story like this explode online.
Let's go through them. First is simplicity.
Right. The narrative of a man finds unclaimed land and starts a country is incredibly easy to understand and share.
Second is novelty. It's a bizarre, highly visual story of planting a flag in a European forest. It stands out in newsfeed.
And third is the utopian branding, the promise of a perfect, uncorrupted society.
Yeah, the framing of Liberland as a haven for crypto enthusiasts, completely free from the heavy taxation regulations of traditional states.
Which acts as a massive magnet for a specific, highly vocal online demographic.
It taps into a deep well of anti-establishment rhetoric. Liberland even utilizes a cryptocurrency called Merit, or LLM, integrating blockchain technology directly into its proposed governance model.
So when you combine the visual symbolism of the flag with the appeal of a digital, decentralized future, you have a story that is literally engineered for social media algorithms.
It's perfect viral bait. But the source text points out a brilliant paradox at the heart of this media strategy.
The paradox of ambiguity.
Exactly. Liberland's symbolic power actually depends entirely on its ambiguous, unresolved status.
Wait, unpack that for a second. It depends on being unresolved.
Yes. It functions far more effectively as a media concept than it ever could as a real territorial reality.
Oh, I see. Imagine if the international community suddenly recognized Gornja Siga as the fully sovereign nation of Liberland tomorrow.
Right. Imagine they just said, okay, you win, it's yours.
Immediately, the founder would have to deal with the crushing logistical realities of statecraft.
Yes. How do you build a sewage system, a power grid, and housing in an active, muddy floodplain?
Right. How do you secure your borders against smuggling? How do you enforce contracts when someone steals your crypto?
And how do you manage diplomatic relations with Croatia and Serbia, who control literally all the access roads, the airspace, and the river itself?
The moment they have to decide who pays to pave the road or how to negotiate transit rights for building materials, that pristine libertarian dream of zero state intervention hits a massive reality check.
The unresolved nature of the border dispute is what allows the idea of Liberland to survive rhetorically.
Because they don't actually have to build the road.
Exactly. Croatian border police routinely arrest or turn back individuals attempting to access Gornja Siga.
So the Croatian police are actually acting as the perfect scapegoat.
Yes. This physical barrier prevents Liberland from having to actually implement its utopian policies on the ground.
Wow. So it allows it to remain a pristine, untested ideal in the digital space. The fact that practical sovereignty remains impossible is exactly what keeps the myth alive.
It's brilliant in a way.
Think about how you consume news. Are you more likely to click on a dense, multi-paragraph headline explaining a decades-long cadastral dispute over the Danube River border?
Definitely not.
No. Or are you going to click a bright, flashy headline reading, Crypto Billionaires Start New Country in Europe?
The media fascination completely compresses all this dense, vital historical complexity. The Yugoslav wars, the treaties, the nuances of international law, it compresses it all into a simplified, viral story. Social media rewards emotionally engaging content and narrative disruption over technical legal analysis. And this leads to what I think is the most profound insight of the research.
Let's hear it.
Liberland is not just a quirky news story. It reflects a broader transformation in our political culture.
A shift in how we view government itself.
Yes. We are entering an era where spectacle increasingly competes with institutional legitimacy. Digital audiences respond much more strongly to narratives of hacking the system than they do to the slow, grinding realities of diplomacy and law.
So what does this all mean? Why are thousands of people online eager to buy into the mythology of Liberland?
Right, investing their time and, crucially, their cryptocurrency.
Yeah, even when the legal and historical foundations are practically non-existent. What is the deep psychological appeal driving this?
The popularity of micronations like Liberland reveals a widespread, genuine dissatisfaction with traditional institutions.
People are just tired.
Yeah. It is a psychological response to a profound distrust in modern governments. People are feeling that legacy systems are too slow, too bureaucratic, or just structurally incapable of adapting to the digital age.
So people are attracted to Liberland not because they actually want to pack up their lives and move to a mosquito-infested floodplain without running water.
No, of course not.
They are attracted to the emotional symbolism it represents. It promises freedom from bureaucracy. It promises opt-in governance where you feel like your voice actually matters.
And it represents technological optimism, the idea that blockchain and smart contracts can just code away human corruption and inefficiency.
Which is a very seductive idea.
It really is. It offers an escape from political friction. In political science, there is this concept of voice versus exit.
Voice versus exit, okay.
When you are dissatisfied with the state, you can use your voice to try and change it from within. Voting, protesting, running for office.
Which is exhausting and incredibly slow.
Very slow. Or you can choose exit, you leave. Liberland represents the ultimate fantasy of exit.
The promise of a startup country where you can hit reset and build a governance model from scratch.
Exactly. But, as we discussed, the reality of statecraft is brutal. A country is not just a well-designed website, a sleek flag, and a Discord server.
Right. It requires physical infrastructure, complex diplomatic recognition, security systems, legal enforcement, and taxation mechanisms.
Which are the very things many people fleeing the Liberland are trying to escape in the first place.
It's a total catch-22.
And the modern international order strongly resists spontaneous state creation, because global stability depends on predictable borders and recognized monopolies on violence.
Without that predictability, geopolitical fragmentation just escalates out of control.
So Liberland occupies this incredibly ambiguous zone. It's part political experiment, part media performance, part ideological branding, and part speculative futurism.
And the thing is, this isn't really about whether a decentralized, crypto-backed governance model is morally right or wrong.
No, that's a different debate entirely.
Right. It's about the mechanics of how that model tries to map itself onto a physical space with pre-existing hard legal framework.
Exactly. Separating the mythology from the documented history is essential. Because if we don't understand the real history, we become susceptible to the myth.
We start believing that complex geopolitical issues can be solved simply by declaring them solved online.
And that's dangerous. The research emphasizes that understanding the silence of diplomatic history is just as important as analyzing the noise of internet culture.
Because the past holds its ground, even when the present tries to code right over it.
Perfectly said.
Well, let's briefly recap this incredible journey. We started with a bizarre anomaly on the banks of the Danube River, a place where a shifting river, 19th century Austro-Hungarian engineering, and old cadastral maps created a literal bureaucratic blind spot.
Right. And we navigated through the strict rules of international law, the ubi possidetis juris principle, and the heavy, often dark colonial baggage of terra nullius.
Then we explored the silent archives of the 1990s peace negotiations, realizing that the absence of evidence regarding Gornja Siga is not some grand conspiracy.
No, it's simply the reality of a desperate era focused on ending a war and drawing ceasefire lines, rather than designing digital utopias.
And finally, we unpacked how the internet took that tiny administrative glitch and engineered it into a viral piece of political mythology.
A symbol of our collective desire to escape the burdens of modern governance through cryptocurrency and decentralization.
So before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on, extending beyond the paper we read today.
I'm intrigued. What is the extrapolation here?
Well, we've established that the mythology of Liberland proves people are desperate for alternatives to traditional nations, right? They want these simplified, technologically optimistic communities.
Yes, the appeal is definitely there.
So what happens when these massive, globally networked, crypto-funded virtual communities, these network states, decide that media symbolism just isn't enough anymore?
Oh, wow.
If the internet can take a forgotten patch of the Danube and turn it into a viral nation state today, what entirely virtual cloud countries might try to leverage their decentralized capital to literally buy, lease, or hack their way into the world's border disputes tomorrow?
That is a terrifying and fascinating question. When digital capital and highly networked populations meet physical geography, the traditional rules of the international system are going to face a stress test unlike anything we've seen before.
Absolutely. So next time you see a beautiful picture of a misty river valley with a solitary yellow sign, ask yourself what unseen forces, historical, legal, and digital, are fighting over that landscape. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the narratives behind the viral headlines, and we will catch you on the next one.